I had been on the road for almost 16 hours straight, hauling a load of refrigerated produce from the outskirts of Kansas City to a small distribution hub in rural Nebraska. The night was unusually dark, the moon hidden behind thick clouds, and the highway stretched in long, straight lines ahead, broken only by the faint glow of distant headlights or the reflective signs marking curves or exits. I had done long hauls before, but that night something felt off, the kind of uneasy feeling that sits at the back of your neck like static electricity before a storm. The radio was my only companion, but even it felt hollow. Most stations carried low-quality music or repetitive talk shows. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic click of the tires on the asphalt became louder as my fatigue grew. I had stopped only twice that day for fuel and a quick coffee. My eyelids were heavy and I could feel the corners of my vision going slightly blurry, but the load was perishable and I couldn't afford a long rest. Not yet. Around mile marker 142, I noticed a car tailing me. At first, I thought it was coincidence, a small sedan keeping pace as if it were just another vehicle on the road. But as miles passed, I realized it wasn't passing. It was staying behind, never close, never overtaking, just following. I tried adjusting my speed slightly, dropping 10 miles per hour, then accelerating, but the car mirrored me every time. My chest tightened, a creeping awareness of danger settling over me. The road was straight and open, but the area around it was densely wooded on both sides. A trucker knows that woods at night aren't just dark, they're silent in a way that makes you overthink every rustle, every shadow. I kept glancing into the rearview mirror, but the driver was impossible to see. The headlights were dimmed, or maybe it was the distance, but there was no reflection of a human face, no movement, just the steady pulse of lights. By the time I reached a stretch of road that cut through an old, abandoned industrial area, my stomach was twisting into knots. This section was notorious for potholes, narrow lanes, and fading signs. I had to slow down almost to a crawl to make it through safely. The car behind me did the same, keeping the exact distance. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. The logical part of my brain kept telling me it was probably just a driver lost or trying to navigate, but instinct screamed something else. I considered pulling off at the next rest stop. There were very few that late at night and most were closed. The next open one was about 10 miles ahead, but the closer I got, the more I noticed the car acting strangely. It was no longer just following, it seemed to be maneuvering. Every slight movement I made, it adjusted in sync. When I swerved slightly to avoid a pothole, it swerved the same way. When I braked lightly, its lights dimmed and then came back on in perfect unison. That wasn't just coincidence, it was deliberate. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and decided to take the next exit. My pulse was hammering in my ears and my hands were clammy. The exit ramp was tight, but I navigated it carefully, and so did the car. It followed me off the highway, not aggressively, but as if it had calculated every move I was making. I drove through small town streets, headlights illuminating boarded-up shops and empty gas stations. Nothing moved except me in that car. The thought that someone could be watching my every turn made the hairs on my neck stand up. I passed a convenience store with a light on and made a snap decision. I pulled in, tires crunching over gravel, and parked under the single flickering street lamp. The car slowed but didn't stop. I kept the engine running, doors locked, scanning every shadow, every reflection in the windows. It circled the lot slowly before pulling back onto the main road and disappearing into the darkness. Relief hit me in waves, but I didn't relax. Not yet. My mind raced. Who would follow a trucker this way? Most highway trouble is random, opportunistic, nothing this precise. I waited a good 20 minutes, double-checking all mirrors before slowly pulling back onto the highway. The road seemed quieter now, less menacing, but I couldn't shake the tension coiled in my shoulders. The rhythm of the engine and tires returned, but my nerves were raw. That was when I noticed something else. The streetlights ahead of me were out. Not the usual flicker, but completely dark for nearly a mile, leaving only the blackness of the road and the faint outline of guardrails. My heart skipped a beat. I had no choice but to drive through it. Halfway through the dark stretch, I heard at first the faint thump against the trailer. I slammed the brakes instinctively, skidding slightly, and glanced into the mirrors. Nothing. My stomach sank as I realized the sound wasn't random debris. It was something hitting the trailer. Then again, steady, slow, deliberate. The kind of sound that sends your mind racing. My pulse skyrocketed. I considered stopping, but in total darkness on a deserted road, that might be worse. I forced myself to breathe steadily, gripping the wheel tighter, scanning every shadow, every curve. The thumping continued for almost a mile before fading as the next section of road entered a better lit area. Sweat ran down my face and my hands were shaking as I eased the truck to the shoulder. I checked the load, the doors, the locks, everything intact. Nothing missing, nothing tampered with. That was worse than if something had been stolen. The realization that someone could have climbed onto my trailer and then disappeared into the night chilled me to the bone. The rest of the drive was tense. I avoided the usual highway stops, kept my speed moderate and stayed in well-lit areas. By the time I reached the distribution hub in Nebraska, dawn was breaking. The pale light of morning washed over the empty loading docks. I parked, shut off the engine and sat for a long moment, letting the quiet normalcy of the day begin to ease the tension in my body. The dispatcher waved from the dock as I climbed down, and I forced a casual smile, pretending nothing had happened. I unloaded the trailer carefully, checking the doors and locks again, making mental notes for later. Once everything was done, I parked in a secure lot behind the building. I took a long shower, washed away the grime, the sweat, and the lingering adrenaline. Even then, the memory of the car, the dark stretch of road, and the thumping on the trailer kept replaying in my mind. I called the local police to report a possible suspicious vehicle in the area, providing descriptions and mile markers. They took the report seriously and promised to patrol the route that night. It wasn't much, but at least it was something. That day I realized something critical. Highway driving isn't just about fatigue or weather, it's about awareness, instincts, and respect for the unseen dangers that come out at night. I had avoided a potentially dangerous situation by staying alert, trusting my gut and not panicking. It wasn't glamorous, but it was survival. By mid-morning, the sun was high enough to warm the lot and the nerves had dulled. I made sure the truck was fully refueled and ready for the next haul. The dispatcher offered me another route, one much longer but safer, and I took it without hesitation. Driving through daylight with the roads populated and visible felt almost luxurious after the tension of the previous night. The stretch of darkness, the car that followed, and the heavy silence of the abandoned industrial area would stick with me, but I carried it as a lesson, not a curse. By the time I reached home a couple of days later, I was tired but safe. I parked the truck in the yard, took the key out, and leaned against the door for a long moment, breathing in the familiar smells of diesel and metal. The night had been terrifying, yes, but it had ended with me in one piece, still alert, still alive, still capable. That was the end of it. The darkness on the road stayed on the road and life went on. I had survived, and that alone made the night worth recounting. I had been on the road for almost 14 hours straight. The interstate stretched in front of me like a ribbon of black under the dim glow of my headlights, empty except for the occasional distant taillight that flickered in the dark like a lonely firefly. My rig, a big 18-wheeler I'd driven for years, hummed steadily beneath me. The tires on the asphalt made that low, steady thrum that becomes almost hypnotic after hours of night driving. I was tired, sure, but I still had another 300 miles before I could even think about stopping. The weather had shifted an hour ago. I'd been driving under a dry, cold sky, and suddenly, without warning, it started raining. Not a light drizzle, either, more like someone had dumped a bucket of water over the highway. The rain pounded the windshield and I cranked the wipers to their fastest setting, but it felt like they were just smearing water across the glass instead of clearing it. My tires hissed on the wet asphalt and I slowed down just enough to keep control, but not so much that traffic behind me, what little there was, would get impatient. The rain made everything feel different, distant. Streetlights cast long, blurry reflections across the road, and the line markings looked like streaks of paint running in the water. My headlights caught on signs, bridges, guardrails, all shimmering like they were moving with the rain instead of standing still. There was something about driving in heavy rain at night that always made me a little uneasy. It wasn't fear of an accident exactly, but more like the road itself felt alive, unpredictable, like it could throw anything at you at any moment. About 40 miles in, I noticed a semi-truck up ahead, parked at the side of the highway, hazard lights flashing faintly through the sheets of rain. It was strange, the kind of thing that sticks in your mind because it's not normal. Most drivers pull over at exits or rest areas, not in the middle of a rainstorm on a lonely stretch of interstate. As I passed, I slowed a little to give him room, keeping a sharp eye on him. He wasn't moving, not a single sign of life. But the cab door was wide open, flapping in the wind, and the engine was off. My stomach sank a little. You see a lot on the road: wrecks, breakdowns, but something about an empty truck, doors open in the rain, always sets off a little alarm in your chest. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just inside checking the trailer, maybe called for help. I increased my speed, my rig cutting through the sheets of rain. I stayed focused on the road, hands tight on the wheel, eyes scanning the asphalt for anything out of place. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a shadow or a trick of the headlights. There was someone standing in the middle of the lane up ahead, just staring at me. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding, the tires screaming on the wet road. My rig swerved slightly, but I managed to keep it straight. The figure didn't move, didn't even flinch. Just stood there in the pouring rain, arms at his sides, soaking wet. I hit the horn. No response. I flicked the high beams. Still nothing. The man didn't move, and the closer I got, the clearer it became that he wasn't trying to get out of the way. He was just standing there. My first instinct was to swerve, but there was no shoulder wide enough, and the rain made any sudden maneuver dangerous. My rig weighed over 30,000 pounds fully loaded. I couldn't just stop on a dime. I braced myself and veered slightly to the left, just missing him by inches. Water sprayed everywhere, my heart in my throat. The man didn't move until I passed, and then, like something out of a bad dream, he turned and ran straight into the guardrail on the side of the highway. I caught a glimpse of his face in the brief reflection of my side mirror. Wild, panicked, almost like he had no idea where he was, or maybe he did and it didn't matter. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not on a highway like that in the middle of a storm. Not with another truck barreling behind me at 70 miles an hour. I kept going, eyes darting to the rearview mirror. The rain seemed heavier now, the windshield a solid wall of water. My hands ached from gripping the wheel so tight. Every nerve in my body screamed to pull over, but there was nothing, no rest area, no lighted exit, no gas station. Just me, the rain, and the dark. The next hour was hell. Every shadow, every reflection, every line on the road seemed alive. I passed another car, empty, just parked on the side, hazard lights flashing. I saw movement in the woods beyond the guardrails, small, fast, impossible to identify. My brain wanted to rationalize it, tell myself it was just a deer or some sort of trick of the headlights, but the way my stomach twisted told me it wasn't so simple. The road felt different, dangerous in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. I was halfway through the stretch, soaked from the sweat of fear and tension, when I noticed something on the dashboard. A light flashing red. My ABS warning. My rig's anti-lock braking system was malfunctioning. Great. Just great. With the rain and the weight I was carrying, braking suddenly could send me into a spin. My heart sank. I slowed even more, every muscle tense, hands gripping the wheel as though letting go would mean instant disaster. Then I saw it, the exit for a truck stop, glowing like a beacon through the rain. Relief flooded me in an instant, and I forced myself to relax slightly. I took the exit, tires crunching on the wet gravel, and pulled into a lit parking lot. I parked my rig in a corner, under the weak orange glow of a lamp post. The rain was still hammering down, but at least I was stationary. I climbed down from the cab, the water running off my jacket and soaking my boots. I stretched my legs, shaking from tension, eyes scanning the lot. There were other trucks here, drivers huddled inside cabs, waiting out the storm. Everything felt normal again, safe again, though my hands still shook. I checked the rig, looking at the ABS light, tapping the wheel, making sure the brakes hadn't been damaged. Mechanically, everything seemed fine, just a glitch. I poured a coffee from the machine inside the stop, warming my fingers on the cup, letting my heart rate settle. I thought about the man in the road. Whoever he was, whatever he was doing, he was lucky I didn't hit him, but luck didn't erase the terror I felt. I made a mental note to report it in the morning to the highway patrol. By the time the storm eased, I had calmed down enough to rest. I found a quiet corner of the lot, set the rig's engine to idle, and tried to sleep. It was impossible to shake the memory of the figure in the rain, but at least I was safe. In the morning, I woke to sunlight reflecting off wet asphalt, trucks pulling out of the lot, drivers chatting, stretching their legs. Everything was normal again, almost too normal. I left the truck stop, brakes checked, coffee in my system, the rig humming steadily under me. The highway was dry now, the rain gone, the morning air crisp and clear. I still felt the tension in my shoulders, but I felt alive. Scared, yes, but alive. And I knew that no matter what the highway threw at me, I could handle it as long as I kept my wits and respected the road. The rest of the trip was uneventful. The miles rolled under my tires like they always did, nothing out of the ordinary. By the time I pulled into the delivery lot, the sun was high in the sky. I parked, secured the load, and walked around the rig, stretching my legs. The fear had faded, replaced by relief and a deep sense of respect for the road. I told myself I would always remember that night, the rain, the figure, the feeling of the world turning uncertain under a storm. But I also knew that in trucking, as in life, surviving something like that made you stronger. You respected danger, you respected chance, and you respected yourself for making it through. And that night I made it through. I was hauling a load of frozen meat from Nebraska to Texas, a straight 1,200-mile run that should have been routine. But that night on I-35, routine turned into something I'll never forget. I left Omaha just before midnight, the highway empty except for the occasional headlights cutting through the darkness like knives. My rig was humming steady, the diesel engine vibrating through my bones in the way I had grown used to. Out here, hours blurred together: lights, road, hum of tires, and the constant creeping isolation of the highway. The sky was heavy with low clouds, thick enough to blot out the stars. It felt like the darkness had weight that night, pressing down on the cab of my truck. The road ahead was slick from an earlier rain, and the smell of wet asphalt mixed with diesel hung in the air. My headlights reflected off the wet surface, doubling the line markings in a kind of hypnotic rhythm that can make your mind wander into dangerous places if you're not careful. I'd been driving for almost 6 hours straight since the last rest stop. My eyelids were heavy, my coffee long gone cold in its cup holder, and my radio was nothing but static. Then, out of nowhere, I saw a car parked on the shoulder about half a mile ahead. Its hazard lights were flashing, but the angle looked off, almost like it had been abandoned. There wasn't a single other car around for miles. My instincts screamed at me to keep moving, but curiosity got the better of me. I slowed down to maybe 50, careful to stay far from the edge of the shoulder. As I passed, I noticed something strange. The car wasn't just parked. Its rear door was open, swinging slightly in the wind, and there was a bag on the ground beside it. My stomach dropped. It wasn't uncommon to see broken-down vehicles on long stretches like this, but something about the way it sat there felt deliberate, like it had been staged. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining things, and hit the accelerator to get past it. 5 miles down the road, my mind was still buzzing with unease when my truck started to shudder. At first, I thought it was a tire problem. I eased over to the shoulder, heart hammering in my chest, and jumped out into the cold night air. Rain had started again, a fine mist that made the asphalt glisten. I grabbed my flashlight and walked around the rig. All tires were intact, nothing hanging off, nothing leaking. The engine hummed normally. That's when I noticed the scratch. A long, deep scrape ran along the side of my trailer, right above the axles. My hands went cold. I was alone, miles from the nearest town. Whoever or whatever had done it had to have been fast, and there had been no signs of footprints in the wet asphalt. My mind raced. Maybe it was just a branch from a tree overhanging a ramp back at the last exit. Maybe. But something didn't sit right. I got back in the cab, doors locked, and pulled back onto the road, keeping my speed moderate. I kept my eyes on the rearview mirrors. Nothing followed, but my nerves were shot. Every shadow seemed to move just outside my field of vision. Every time I passed a curve, I swore I saw headlights flash in the distance, but when I glanced again, there was nothing. The rain had gotten heavier, and the wipers struggled to keep up. I pulled over once to wipe down the mirrors and saw it again, the same car, now parked near an abandoned gas station about 10 miles ahead, this time facing the road. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the same car from before, moved by the driver. Maybe someone had broken down and got help. But the thought didn't comfort me. My pulse was racing. I didn't stop. I didn't want to know. I stayed on the throttle, trying to keep the engine noise loud enough to feel safe. Then the road curved sharply downhill, a blind turn, and that's when it happened. My headlights caught movement in the fog, 2 figures stepping into the road, and I slammed on the brakes. My trailer jackknifed slightly in the panic, tires squealing on the wet asphalt. The figures froze, and my truck's horn blared into the night. My adrenaline spiked, fingers white on the steering wheel. By the time I came to a full stop, they were gone. I checked the mirrors again, scanned the road with the flashlight I kept on the dash, and saw nothing. It was like they had never been there. My chest felt tight, like I was running a marathon. I couldn't explain it, but I didn't wait to find out. I punched the gas and didn't slow down for another 20 miles. My eyes flicked constantly between the mirrors and the road ahead. The rain finally let up just as I reached a stretch of open highway. My rig was quiet except for the engine and my ragged breathing. I kept my eyes glued to the road, not daring to blink too long. And then I saw it off in the distance near the shoulder, lights flashing again. Another car. A trap? My stomach churned. I decided to pull over this time at a well-lit truck stop. I needed fuel, coffee, and most importantly to see other people. As I rolled into the lot, I parked near the back, far from other trucks, scanning the area carefully. The place was mostly empty. I could see a lone attendant inside the convenience store. Relief washed over me. I shut off the engine, leaned back in my seat, and tried to calm down. I told myself I was imagining things, that the isolation and the late hour were getting to me. But when I stepped out to stretch, I froze. There, at the edge of the lot, was the same bag I had seen earlier by the first car. Just sitting there in the shadows. No car, no people, just the bag. My gut told me to leave it alone, and I didn't touch it. I got back in the cab, locked the doors, and called the local authorities. I gave them the details and waited. They told me to stay put until they arrived, which didn't take long. 2 patrol cars pulled in, lights cutting through the darkness, and officers approached cautiously. They opened the bag, and what they found confirmed my worst suspicions. It contained a bunch of tools, gloves, and other items that screamed, prepared for trouble. Whoever had been out there wasn't stranded, they were hunting, setting traps, testing the road. The authorities later told me that similar incidents had been reported along that stretch of highway, trucks being followed, sometimes scratched, sometimes sabotaged. But most truckers never saw them in time, and very few came out with their sanity intact. I ended up continuing my route the next day, but I never forgot that night. Every time I drive a long stretch alone now, I remember the headlights, the bag, the figures that weren't supposed to be there. I take extra precautions, check my mirrors constantly, stay in well-lit areas whenever possible, and never slow down for anything unusual on the shoulder. That night taught me something important. The road can be more dangerous than any storm or traffic. It's not just about driving safely, it's about trusting your instincts, staying alert, and knowing that danger can show up in the most ordinary ways. No ghosts, no monsters, just people with bad intentions and a long stretch of empty highway. I learned to respect the darkness, the isolation, and the unknown lurking just beyond my headlights. And that's the scariest part of all. I had been driving for nearly 16 hours straight, the kind of stretch that eats your body and makes your mind float somewhere between awake and completely numb. The highway was long and flat, cutting through endless fields that seemed to blend into the dark sky. My rig, an old Kenworth W900, rumbled beneath me, its engine thumping like a heartbeat in the night. Every few minutes, the cab vibrated from the wind or the cracks in the asphalt, little reminders that I was still alive. I usually hated night driving, but sometimes it was the only way to make time. The sun had disappeared hours ago, and the only light came from my headlights cutting through the thick darkness. I kept my eyes glued to the road, catching the glint of reflectors on the guardrails, and occasionally scanning the rearview mirror for the familiar glint of headlights behind me. There wasn't another car for miles, which is both a blessing and a curse. You get used to the silence, but after hours it starts to play tricks on you. Shadows in the tree line start to look like things that aren't there. The hum of the engine becomes almost a voice in your head, whispering, reminding you that the road never ends. Around mile marker 142, I noticed a car pulled over on the shoulder. A beat-up sedan, headlights off, hazard lights blinking. I always slow down when I see someone stopped. Usually it's nothing, a flat tire or an engine that gave out, but sometimes it's trouble. This one felt off. The car was old, missing patches of paint, and the driver's side door was slightly ajar. I slowed my rig to a crawl, checking the car from the cab, but there was no one in sight. No movement, no sign of life. Just the quiet hum of the night and the rhythmic pulse of my own truck. I kept going, thinking I'd call it in when I got to the next town. The road stretched on, long and empty, the asphalt glowing under my lights. Then, almost suddenly, I saw something in the distance. A figure walking along the shoulder, moving toward my lane. I squinted, heart starting to beat faster. It was a man, or what looked like a man. His clothes were dark, blending into the night, and he carried something long and thin over his shoulder. At first, I thought maybe it was a stick or a piece of pipe. But as I got closer, my gut twisted. The man wasn't walking normally. He moved with a slow, deliberate shuffle, like he was testing the ground, waiting for me to notice him. I slowed even more, heart pounding, keeping one hand on the horn. There's a rule when you're on these roads. Don't stop unless you have a reason, don't give strangers a chance to mess with you. The figure kept moving, staying in my lane, forcing me to steer around him. I flicked the high beams, hoping it would scare him off, but he didn't flinch. Then, in a split second, he raised whatever he was holding over his head. My stomach dropped. It looked like a crowbar, and the moonlight caught the metal in a flash. I swerved hard, nearly losing control on the asphalt cracks, and my rig's tires screeched. My hands shook, gripping the wheel tight. I pushed the pedal down, engine roaring as I passed him, and that's when I noticed the smell. Sharp, metallic, unmistakable. Blood. It hit me in the nose and made my stomach churn. I didn't look back, I didn't want to know. My focus was on the road, on keeping the rig straight, on surviving. I kept driving faster than I normally would at night. The highway was empty, but my mind raced. Every shadow looked like him waiting to jump out again. Every deer crossing sign felt like a warning. I checked my mirrors obsessively, knowing he couldn't keep up with the truck at speed, but the paranoia didn't let up. Hours passed. My eyes burned, my neck stiffened, but I didn't dare sleep. I had my CB radio on, listening to the static, hoping for another driver to report something, anything, but there was nothing. Silence. By the time I reached the next rest stop, I was trembling. I parked my rig in the far corner, as far from the main lot as I could get, leaving enough space to maneuver out if needed. I didn't sleep in the cab that night. I sat with the engine running, lights low, scanning the darkness outside. The rest stop was mostly empty, a few semi-trucks scattered across the lot. I could hear the occasional drip of water from a leaky gutter, the hum of a distant freeway, the rustle of something moving in the shadows. Every time a car door slammed in the distance, my heart leapt. I finally decided to take a walk, mostly to stretch, mostly to make sure I wasn't going insane. I kept my flashlight on, sweeping the edges of the parking lot, checking behind every dumpster, every patch of overgrown grass. Nothing. Just the wind moving through the weeds and the faint glow of the distant highway. I even checked the back of my trailer just to be safe, running my flashlight across the metal walls. Nothing. By the time I climbed back into the cab, I was exhausted. My hands shook from adrenaline, and my mind replayed that figure over and over. But the morning brought clarity. Sunlight cutting through the horizon, warming the asphalt, revealing details the night hides. I got out to inspect the stretch of road where I saw him. There were tire marks in the dirt along the shoulder, old and dry, leading to the spot where the car had been. I noticed a few drops of something dark, almost black in the early light. My stomach clenched. Blood, old but real. Whoever or whatever had been there was long gone. I called it in, gave a report to Highway Patrol, described the car, the figure, everything. They said they'd check it out, but I didn't hold out hope. These stretches of road see things that never get solved. I drove on, but I stayed alert, shifting my seat upright, keeping my hands on the wheel and eyes scanning every inch of the road. Weeks later, I heard on the news that a couple had been attacked on that same highway. The husband didn't make it, and the wife survived only because she ran into a service station and called 911. The description of the attacker matched the figure I saw. They never caught him. That knowledge left a cold weight in my chest, but strangely, it also left me with a sense of relief. I had been careful, alert, and lucky. From that night on, I never underestimated the road again. I drive with more caution, more awareness, and I never ignore a gut feeling. I park in well-lit areas, I keep my cab locked even when I'm at a stop, and I always check my mirrors, especially when the highway is empty. The job hasn't gotten any less hard, but I've learned that it's not the storms, the snow, or the fatigue that can kill you on the road, it's the people you don't see coming. And surviving isn't about luck. It's about attention, instinct, and respect for what can hide in the shadows. That night changed me. I still drive those stretches, still haul loads across long, lonely highways. But I never forget that feeling, the one where your chest tightens, the air feels heavier, and you realize that something in this world doesn't care about you at all. And when I make it to the next rest stop or the next town, I take a moment to breathe, to feel the warmth of sunlight or a coffee in my hands, and I let myself relax, knowing I made it through the worst. That clarity, that safety, is the only reward worth the fear. I was rolling down a stretch of highway I'd driven dozens of times, hauling a load of refrigerated goods from Chicago to Denver. It was late, the kind of late that makes the air feel heavier even through the vents of the cab. My rig was humming steadily, tires thumping rhythmically against the asphalt, lights cutting through the darkness like knives. I'd been on the road for nearly 16 hours and my eyelids felt like they had weights attached. Sleep was knocking, but I couldn't stop, yet the load was tight on schedule and missing it wasn't an option. The highway was mostly empty. I passed a few cars every now and then, their headlights slicing through the night. The only other constant was the landscape, flat and unbroken except for the occasional sign or gas station. Everything felt eerily normal, almost too normal, which only added to the tension. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about the stories you hear on trucker forums, stories about trucks going off the road, drivers falling asleep and never waking up, or worse. I shrugged it off. I wasn't about to let my imagination get the better of me. That's when I noticed the first sign that something was off. My mirrors caught movement on the shoulder, just a flicker, a blur, but by the time I blinked, it was gone. At first, I thought it was just an animal, maybe a deer or a stray dog. But the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. My hand tightened on the wheel. I kept scanning the road behind me through the mirrors, but nothing appeared. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. The highway stretched for miles, straight and monotonous, with only the occasional curve. The radio had died hours ago, static filling the speakers, and the hum of the engine became the only companion in the cab. I decided to take a short break, maybe stretch my legs and clear my head. I spotted a rest area a few miles up and eased off the throttle, feeling the brakes resist before the massive weight of the rig brought it to a crawl. Pulling into the lot, I noticed it was empty. No other trucks, no cars, not even a maintenance van. The place was illuminated by dim lights, flickering in and out like they were running on borrowed time. I parked near the edge, stepped out, and the cold air hit me. It was sharper than usual, cutting through my jacket and making me shiver. I walked around a little, stretching my back and legs, trying to shake off the tension. Everything seemed normal at first. The wind whispered through the cracks in the asphalt, and distant traffic hummed somewhere far off the main highway. Then I heard it, a faint knocking, soft at first, coming from the back of my trailer. I froze. The trailer doors were locked tight, secured with chains and a padlock. I hadn't left anything in the back for anyone to take. This was refrigerated freight, sealed and tracked. My heartbeat sped up. I crept closer, every muscle tense, expecting perhaps a raccoon or a stray animal. But there was nothing, just the echo of the knocking against the metal frame. I shined my flashlight along the side of the trailer. No one was there. I chalked it up to nerves, convincing myself the wind had shifted, the sound bouncing off the structure of the building. I got back in the cab, locked the doors, and sat with the engine running, telling myself a few minutes of rest would help me stay sharp. I closed my eyes for what felt like seconds, but when I opened them again, the shadows outside the windshield seemed different, deeper somehow, stretching across the lot in ways that made my skin crawl. I shook it off, backing out of the lot slowly. The highway welcomed me back, dark and endless. That's when the headlights appeared behind me out of nowhere. At first, I thought it was just a car that had been ahead of me and overtook me, but as I watched, it became clear it was following. Close, maybe too close. I kept my speed steady, but the lights didn't blink or shift lanes, they stayed right there, sticking like glue to my mirrors. I tried not to panic, telling myself some guy was just trying to get somewhere fast. But the feeling in my gut wasn't one of impatience or speed, it was something darker. I passed another rest area, thinking maybe I could lose them there, but as I slowed, the headlights behind me slowed in perfect sync. Every exit I took, every turn, every speed change, I mirrored my moves and they mirrored mine. My chest tightened. I called dispatch, using the CB to announce my location. Unit 45, rolling near mile marker 142, visibility good. Nothing. Just static. I tried again. Nothing. Not even a crackle. Panic started creeping in. My eyes darted constantly, mirrors scanning for movement, trying to find a car or truck, anyone, but there was nothing. The highway stretched endlessly and I was alone. Or maybe I wasn't. Then it happened. The lights disappeared. 1 second they were there like a predator stalking me, and the next, gone. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, heart hammering. For the first time in hours, I felt exposed, vulnerable, like the highway itself had shifted into some uncharted zone. I kept driving, watching the mirrors, scanning the dark shoulders, the empty fields, the occasional blinking sign. Nothing. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. It was impossible to tell anymore. My body was numb from tension, my hands gripping the wheel so hard it left marks. And then I saw the skid marks. Fresh, dark streaks cutting across the highway, leading to a twisted, mangled metal guardrail. I slowed, stomach turning. Whoever or whatever had been here hadn't gotten away cleanly. There were no cars around, no lights, no sounds. Just the aftermath of something violent and sudden. I swallowed hard, checking the mirrors. Still empty. I didn't know if what I saw was connected to the lights, the knocking, or just a coincidence. But I didn't care. The rest of the drive, I didn't stop. I didn't take exits, I didn't pull over. I kept the rig moving at a steady, careful pace, alert to every flicker of movement, every shadow across the asphalt. I passed dawn creeping over the horizon, painting the sky pale orange and pink, and for the first time since night had fallen, I felt like maybe I was okay. By the time I reached the truck stop just outside Denver, I was drained. I parked in a well-lit lot near other trucks, my body trembling from tension, lack of sleep, and sheer adrenaline. I got out, stretched, and looked around. Everything seemed normal again. Trucks parked in neat rows, drivers grabbing coffee or walking to the showers. No shadows, no lights sticking to my mirrors. Just the quiet hum of a normal morning. I checked the trailer doors, still locked tight. The refrigeration unit was running perfectly. Nothing missing, nothing tampered with. It was as if the night had been some fevered dream, a stretch of highway designed to test the limits of focus and nerves. But I knew better. Something had been there. Something real enough to keep me alert, to chase me through the darkness without ever showing itself. I called dispatch again, reporting my arrival and the oddities of the night. They listened, took notes, offered a polite "be careful out there," but clearly had no idea. That was fine. I didn't need anyone to validate what I'd been through. I just needed to stop driving, to rest, to shake the memory of those headlights and that knocking from my mind. I spent the day unloading the cargo, the sun warm on my back, the trucks around me full of life and movement. The nightmare highway seemed like a distant memory in the daylight, but I knew I wouldn't forget it. Nights like that stayed with you, they left marks deeper than scrapes or bruises, invisible scars from fear and the unknown. By evening, my rig empty and clean, I finally allowed myself a shower and a proper meal. Sleep came easier that night, heavy and uninterrupted, but the images lingered. Shadows stretching across the road, headlights following too closely, and the soft knocking that I could never explain. Real, tangible fear doesn't come from ghosts or fairy tales, it comes from knowing the world can shift beneath you in a second. And there's nothing you can do but hold on, drive through it, and hope to reach morning intact. And I did. I reached morning. I reached Denver. I reached safety. That was the ending I needed, clear and solid, not wrapped in mystery or magic, just survival, focus, and the raw, unforgiving reality of the road. I had been driving for nearly 12 hours straight, the highway stretching out like a black ribbon under the dim glow of my headlights. The cab of my truck smelled faintly of stale coffee and the leather of my seat, and the hum of the engine was my only companion. Out here, miles from the nearest town, silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, the kind that presses against your chest when you're the only person awake in the middle of the night. I had started in Chicago that morning, hauling a load of industrial equipment down to Dallas. Most of the route was familiar, but I took a detour through a less traveled stretch of highway when I realized the main interstate had a long line of construction and detours. At first, the road seemed fine, thin asphalt, some cracks, nothing serious, but as the sun disappeared behind the horizon, everything changed. The trees along the roadside seemed to lean closer, shadows stretching into shapes that made me tense without reason. The radio had been on low, playing the same late-night AM music, but it fizzled out suddenly, leaving me with only the engine and my own thoughts. Around 2 a.m. I noticed a broken-down car on the shoulder up ahead. Its hazard lights flickered weakly, one bulb burned out completely. Normally, I'd have kept driving, but something about it made me slow down. The car looked abandoned, doors closed, no movement inside. I kept my distance, the truck's headlights scanning the cracked pavement, and passed it without slowing more than necessary. The road ahead was narrow and uneven, patches of tar and gravel that rattled my rig. My eyes were tired, my muscles stiff, but I told myself I just had to push through a few more hours to make it to the next rest stop. Then, just as I rounded a curve, something moved on the side of the road. Not a deer, not a shadow, something human. I slammed the brakes instinctively, the truck jerking forward before coming to a stop with a shudder. My heart hammered as I watched, frozen, as a figure stepped out from behind a tree, walking toward the road. It was a man, disheveled, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. I noticed immediately that something was off. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he was testing the space around him, making sure he wasn't seen by anything else out there. I didn't roll the window down. I didn't even reach for the door. Instead, I put the truck in gear slowly, inching past him. The tires crunched over gravel and he didn't flinch. He didn't even move out of the way. For a moment, I swore I could feel him watching me from the side mirror, and I pressed the accelerator harder, the engine growling as I put distance between us. That stretch of highway seemed endless. The trees closed in on both sides, the blackness so complete that even my high beams barely reached. My stomach tightened every time I saw something on the roadside, a fallen sign, a twisted piece of metal, a patch of dirt that looked like it had been recently disturbed. I tried to rationalize it. I was tired, my eyes playing tricks, my imagination running wild. But then I saw tire tracks in the gravel shoulder parallel to mine that hadn't been there a moment ago. Fresh tracks. They weren't far behind me, and they weren't consistent like a car that had lost control. They were careful, deliberate. I checked the mirrors constantly. Nothing. But then, at the edge of my vision, I saw movement again. The figure from before? Maybe. Hard to tell in the darkness. My pulse quickened. The road twisted again, and the truck swayed slightly as I fought to keep it steady. My hands were clammy on the wheel, and I could feel every vibration from the tires through the pedals. My mind ran through every possible scenario. If it was a person, what could they want out here? If it was someone dangerous, how could I stay safe? The truck was heavy and cumbersome, but it was also a barrier, and I was determined not to leave it. Hours seemed to stretch. The roadside was littered with debris, branches, rocks, even a broken street sign that had likely been hit by another vehicle. Somewhere behind me, I heard it, the faint crunch of tires over gravel. Not one car, not one truck, but something smaller, moving faster, matching my pace perfectly. I kept my speed steady, not daring to slow, my eyes glued to the mirrors, every nerve alert. The highway twisted again, a sharp turn that forced me to slow. And then, in that small window when my rig's headlights passed over the shoulder, I saw him. The man. Standing with his arms crossed, staring at me, motionless. I didn't stop. I couldn't. My stomach felt hollow. The rig groaned as I accelerated past, tires biting into the asphalt. I glanced in the mirror again. He was gone. For a brief moment, relief surged, but then I saw something worse. Tire tracks reappearing beside mine, exactly parallel, like he had caught up with me faster than should have been possible. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. The next stretch of road had a bridge. It was narrow, old steel beams arching over a small creek, rust eating at the edges. I knew there were emergency phones along the bridge, but I also knew stopping would be foolish. I forced myself to focus on the truck, the feel of the wheel, the vibrations through my feet, the way the headlights caught the metal beams. Nothing was behind me, nothing on the sides, but the tension never left. I gritted my teeth and crossed it slowly, praying for the open road on the other side. Finally, in the distance, I saw it, the neon glow of a 24-hour truck stop. My relief was physical. I felt my shoulders unclench for the first time in hours. I signaled the rig, took the exit, and pulled into the lot, the gravel crunching under the tires as I came to a stop. I parked far from the entrance, lights off, taking stock of my breathing. The truck felt impossibly heavy and solid under me, and I realized how much I had relied on it for protection. I didn't see him there. I didn't hear anything unusual. I stepped out carefully, circling the truck once, making sure the lot was empty besides the occasional other truckers and their rigs. Nothing. My heart slowed gradually, though it didn't stop pounding. I climbed back in, locked the doors, and let the engine run while I drank cold coffee from a thermos. In the light of the lot, the fear that had been clawing at me in the darkness seemed almost unreal. No one else had passed by. No one had been near the truck. I considered calling the police, but what could I say? A man on a remote highway following me? It would sound crazy. I decided instead to wait until dawn, and when the sun finally rose, I could see the road clearly. When I finally left the lot, the morning light made everything look harmless. The trees were just trees, the gravel shoulder just gravel. The broken car from before was gone, leaving no trace. And though I never saw him again, the feeling of being followed stayed with me for days afterward. Every time I hit an empty stretch of road, my eyes flicked to the mirrors, every nerve on edge. It ended not with confrontation, not with violence, but with survival. I made it to Dallas without another incident. I delivered the load, collected my paycheck, and went to sleep in a real bed for the first time in 3 nights. The memory of that stretch of highway didn't fade, it stayed with me, a reminder of how quickly ordinary things can become terrifying when you're isolated, tired, and exposed. And for the rest of my career, whenever I drove alone at night, I kept my doors locked, my eyes scanning every shadow and my mind prepared for anything. That night taught me that fear doesn't need ghosts. It doesn't need monsters. It just needs the right place, the right time, and the right kind of unknown. I had been on the road for almost 16 hours straight. My rig, a 30-foot Freightliner, was loaded with produce from California, and my next stop was a warehouse in Phoenix. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the desert highway shrouded in darkness. The only light came from my headlights slicing through the black and the occasional passing car's beams. Out here there are no streetlights, no gas stations for miles, just asphalt and the occasional silhouette of a tumbleweed rolling across the road. It had been a long day. My back ached from sitting in the driver's seat, my eyes were gritty from staring at the road, and my mind was foggy from fatigue. I'd stopped earlier in Barstow for a quick cup of coffee, but it hadn't done much to wake me up. The desert has a way of messing with your senses at night. The stillness is so complete it makes your imagination run wild. Around 11, I noticed something on the side of the highway. At first, it was hard to make out just a shape in the distance, but as I got closer, I saw it was a car pulled over on the shoulder. Its hazard lights were blinking, faint but steady. Normally, I don't stop for strangers on the side of the road, especially this late, but something about it tugged at me. There was nobody in sight, no movement, just a dark sedan parked crookedly on the gravel. I slowed down but didn't stop. Something about it felt off. There were no skid marks, no sign of an accident, and the car wasn't damaged. But then I noticed the driver's side door was slightly open. A chill ran down my spine. I'm a trucker. I've seen my fair share of accidents, drunk drivers, and even a few desperate people stranded out here. But this was different. This wasn't a normal roadside breakdown. The silence around it was oppressive, almost unnatural. I debated whether to call the highway patrol, but my phone had almost no signal. The desert loves to eat cell service for breakfast. And even if I did call, it would take hours for anyone to show up. I kept my eyes on the car as I passed. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement inside. Something small, quick, and deliberate. I squinted, trying to make it out, but the darkness swallowed it. My heart started to race. I've been in dangerous situations before, but nothing had me this tense in years. I forced myself to focus on the road. My rig's engine hummed beneath me, a steady reminder that I had control over at least one thing tonight. I pressed on, telling myself it was probably just someone climbing into the back seat or a stray animal. A few miles later, I noticed it again. Another car, this time on the opposite side of the highway facing me. Its headlights were off, but I could just make out the shape of a person standing next to it. I slowed down even more, feeling that primal gut feeling that something was wrong. The person raised a hand, or maybe it was just the light playing tricks, but whatever it was, it didn't seem friendly. I thought about pulling over at the next rest stop, but it was still hours away. My eyelids were heavy and I knew stopping in this area wouldn't be safe. Truck stops are a blessing, but sometimes the middle of nowhere is not. My rig felt like the only solid thing I could rely on. Then I saw the headlights behind me. A pair of them, bright and too close. My pulse jumped. I was moving at 75 miles an hour, and the cars behind me weren't slowing down. Not wanting to cause a scene, I tried to pull over to the right shoulder. The asphalt gave way to gravel and my rig bounced, but I managed to keep it straight. The headlights stayed on me, and I realized this wasn't a normal driver trying to pass, it was following me. Panic crept in. I've been in tight spots before, but nothing like this. I tried to stay calm, but the desert night felt like it was closing in. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The car behind me wasn't slowing. Not only that, it was edging closer, weaving slightly as if testing my reactions. Then it happened. The driver of the car behind me swerved onto the shoulder, too close, almost hitting my trailer. My reflexes kicked in. I slammed the brakes just enough to make the rig rock, my heart hammering. The car swerved back onto the road, but I could see the driver now. A young guy, maybe mid-20s, his eyes wide and intense. He had something in his hand, looked like a wrench or a crowbar, but I couldn't be sure. The trucker instinct kicked in. Time to get the hell out. I hit the gas and moved into the passing lane. I kept an eye on him in the mirror. He stayed with me, matching every lane change, every acceleration. I considered my options: fight, hide, or run. Hiding was impossible out here and fighting was stupid. That left one thing: outrun him. Not by much, just enough to find a place with people. I pushed the rig harder than I had in years, my hands gripping the wheel, knuckles white. My rig isn't a sports car. It's a Freightliner loaded with produce, heavy and cumbersome. But on the straight stretches I could use the weight to my advantage. I remembered a rest area about 10 miles ahead. That had to be my target. The minutes felt like hours. I focused on the road, the sound of tires on asphalt, the low hum of the engine, and my own breathing. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every bend in the road, a trap. And then I saw it, the glowing green sign of the rest area. Salvation. I swerved onto the entrance ramp, tires kicking up dust and gravel. I braked hard, coming to a stop near a lighted parking lot. My heart was still racing, but I felt a sliver of relief. I sat there, engine running, scanning the dark road behind me. The car wasn't there. Not on the entrance ramp, not on the main highway. I waited for a good 10 minutes, just staring at the road, feeling my body tense and aching. Eventually I stepped out and checked my rig. Nothing was touched. My trailer was fine, my cargo intact. I looked around the rest area. Just the occasional trucker nodding or waving, completely oblivious to what I'd just gone through. The relief started to settle in. Whoever had been following me had vanished. I parked close to the lights and kept the engine running. I checked my phone signal was back and called dispatch, telling them I was fine but needed to report a suspicious vehicle on the highway. They advised me to wait at the rest area until first light. I didn't argue. I wasn't taking any chances. I spent the night in the cab, eyes on the mirrors, engine idling, coffee in hand. Every time a shadow moved outside, my heart skipped a beat. But nothing came close. Morning came slow, pale sunlight washing over the desert. I finally felt safe enough to unstrap and stretch my legs. The highway looked empty, peaceful even. I left the rest area at sunrise, sticking to the speed limit but keeping an eye in the mirrors. Nothing followed. The desert returned to its usual calm. My mind replayed the events, every detail, trying to make sense of it. Who was he? Why did he stop following when I reached the rest area? I'll probably never know. But I learned something important that night. Out here the road is full of strangers, some harmless, some not. Trust your instincts and never let your guard down. By the time I reached Phoenix, my body was sore and exhausted, but my mind was clear. I unloaded the produce, double-checked my rig, and took a long shower in the truck stop. The sun was high, warmth filling the room, and for the first time in hours I felt genuinely safe. The desert night had tested me, pushed me to the edge, but I had made it through. No drama, no fairy tales, just me, my rig, and the road. I parked for a proper rest, knowing the next day would bring another long haul. But that night, that stretch of highway, would stay in my mind forever, a reminder that out here, danger isn't always obvious, but it's very real. I was hauling a load of industrial chemicals from Houston up to Chicago, a run that normally takes me about 2 days if I push through with minimal stops. I prefer night driving, less traffic, fewer people, and the hum of the engine becomes almost hypnotic after a while. But this trip was different from the moment I rolled out of the yard. The weather was unusually foggy, not the kind that clings low to the ground in patches, but the kind that swallows everything in a gray soup so thick that my headlights barely cut through it. I slowed down, but the clock was ticking and I needed to make up time to meet the delivery window. The highway was a lonely stretch between Beaumont and Shreveport, mostly straight but lined with thick pine forests that looked like dark walls against the faint glow of my lights. The fog made the trees appear closer, almost looming over the road. I kept my eyes glued to the road, the hum of tires on asphalt and the constant ticking of the air brakes filling the cab. I could barely see 20 feet in front of me. About an hour into the drive, I noticed headlights in the distance. At first, I thought it was just another truck coming the other way, but as it got closer, I realized it was moving strangely. It wasn't maintaining a steady lane, drifting slightly, then correcting, almost like the driver was asleep or impaired. I tried to give it space, moving slightly into the shoulder, but then it swerved closer. My stomach sank. It wasn't just careless driving. Something about the vehicle screamed wrong. It wasn't the speed, it was the rhythm. The headlights would flare into my mirrors, then dip, then flare again. Every time they came close, my body tensed, my knuckles gripping the wheel. I started to think maybe it was one of those idiots trying to race trucks at night, the kind who don't realize the difference in stopping distances. I slowed further, trying to gauge if I should pull off somewhere, but there was nowhere safe for miles. Then it happened. The car or whatever it was started following me. Not passing, not driving normally, but locking onto me like it knew my every movement. I felt my heart hammering in my chest. I thought about my options. There was a rest stop maybe 10 miles ahead, but that meant staying on the same stretch of road with this person behind me, and every mile felt like a lifetime. My radio was dead. No signal, which isn't unusual in that area, but it added to the isolation. I kept driving, keeping my speed steady, hoping the other vehicle would eventually move off. The fog was thick enough that I could barely see the edges of the road. Then I noticed a shadow moving alongside my truck, just at the edge of my peripheral vision. It vanished the moment I turned to look. My stomach turned over. I told myself it was just my imagination, nerves playing tricks. But my gut told me otherwise. By the time I got to the rest stop, my nerves were shot. I pulled in, parked in the farthest corner, and shut off the engine. The fog pressed against the windows, and for a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then I saw it, the car creeping into the lot behind me. I froze. It wasn't just following the highway. It followed me here. I thought about running, but this was the middle of nowhere. Even if I ran to the highway, I'd be easy to catch. Then I noticed something that made my blood run colder. The vehicle didn't park, didn't slow, it just idled, engine barely audible in the fog, waiting. I watched through the rearview mirror, seeing shadows shift, lights flicker. My first instinct was to drive again, but where? Every direction was just road swallowed in fog. Then I remembered the security cameras at the rest stop. Not that they did much good out here, but at least someone might see. I decided I had to make a move. I stayed in the cab for a while, pretending to sleep, trying to appear inconspicuous. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, the car left as suddenly as it arrived. My chest relaxed only slightly. I knew this wasn't over. The rest of the drive to Shreveport was tense. I kept glancing in my mirrors every few seconds. Every movement in the fog made my heart jump. When I finally got off the highway to stop for fuel, I saw tire marks in the lot, not just random tracks but patterns circling, waiting. Whoever it was, they had been watching me the entire time I stopped. I started considering whether I should report this to the police. Normally I would, but the thought of explaining the situation sounded ridiculous. Yes, officer. Someone in a car followed my truck through fog for over 200 miles, but I didn't get a license plate. It wasn't just the uncertainty that unnerved me. It was the realization that the person didn't need to catch me to scare me. The chase itself was enough. The next morning I resumed the drive. Sunlight was breaking through the fog, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. I stopped for coffee at a diner, trying to shake off the tension. That's when I saw a news snippet on a small TV in the corner. A local man had been arrested after a long pursuit where he'd followed multiple trucks, harassing drivers, trying to force them off the road. Reading the story, chills ran down my spine. The description matched the car I saw exactly. I had been lucky. Most drivers weren't so observant or calm. Many accidents had happened before the police caught him. I took extra precautions the rest of the trip, keeping my eyes constantly on the mirrors, planning escape routes at every exit, and not stopping unless absolutely necessary. Every stop had to be carefully chosen. By the time I rolled into Chicago, the sun was fully up, the streets crowded with traffic, and the tension in my body slowly unwinding. I parked at the warehouse, took a long, deep breath, and finally allowed myself to relax. What hit me hardest wasn't the fear of the chase itself, it was the reminder that you can't always predict who or what will be on the road with you, and how quickly control can slip away. Driving a truck is a lonely, exhausting job, but it also requires constant vigilance. That night had reminded me in the harshest way possible. I wrote a detailed report, not just for my own record but for the company and local authorities. I included times, descriptions, locations. It felt necessary, like putting down markers for the reality of what happened. Weeks later, I drove the same stretch again. The memory of that foggy night never fully left me, but the road looked different now. Safer somehow because I had survived it and I had prepared. The car never appeared again, and I never doubted my instincts afterward. I learned to trust the little details, the drifting lights, the shadows, the odd patterns in tire tracks, and how critical it is to stay calm, to assess, and to act. That run changed the way I drove forever. I always mapped exits, kept my phone charged, and never underestimated the solitude of the road. It also reminded me, in a way I can't explain without sounding paranoid, that you never know what's out there. But I also learned something else. Preparation, awareness, and patience can carry you through situations that seem impossible. I had made it through the scariest drive of my life without damage, without injury, without losing my truck, and I came out smarter, sharper, and more cautious. I had won the fight by surviving, by keeping my head while adrenaline wanted to take over. That night wasn't just scary, it was a lesson. And the relief I felt rolling into Chicago, seeing the city skyline break the horizon, was more satisfying than any paycheck. I had faced fear on the highway and came out whole, and that was something no story, no rumor, no ghost tale could ever take from me.